everybody. Welcome to Reline Live. I am Cassie Clancy, and on with me is Michael Rothenberg. We are going to be talking about Snap-Tite. So
I appreciate you having me on today. I will start off with a box culvert lining project from last month, go through another box culvert lining project from the year before. I guess at that point, I'll pass it back off to you. And then with whatever remaining time we have, I have really as many Snap-Tite projects as you guys want me to share. So this was an American West construction installation from last month. With this project, there were 3 different culverts that were either 7 foot by 7 foot or 7 foot by 6 foot box culverts. And those were all to be lined with 48-inch OD Snap-Tite. And then there was one other run of about 70 feet to be lined with 24-inch Snap-Tite. So the portion of the project that I was on site for was one of the 7 foot by 7 foot box culverts being lined with 48-inch Snap-Tite. And here you can see a look at the culverts we were working with. So these culverts were initially installed back in the 1930s, so they'd either surpassed or just about reached their expected design life. So them being about 100 years old, they were at the top of CDOT's priority list. For these culverts, you can see that the grouting tubes were installed ahead of time. These ones weren't completed yet, but with the one that I was on site for, they had installed the grouting tube for each of these 70-foot runs, about 80% of the way to the outlet, one about halfway through the culvert, and then one just poking maybe 5 or 10 feet through that bulkhead at the inlet.
how long was this box culvert? Sorry, Michael, I missed that.
These were right around 70 feet each.
Okay.
And one other slightly unusual twist with this project is that there were concrete shelves poured ahead of time. Most of the time, especially with Snap-Tite, since it has that smooth exterior, it can slide over any sort of corrugations, rusted inverts, and such. But with this one, and with as much annular space as they were having, and also maintain the slope, they wanted to pour these concrete shelves ahead of time and give it a nice smooth surface to slide that Snap-Tite along. So one more look at those grouting tubes.
Is there any reason in particular that they did decide to use 3 grout ports as opposed to probably the 1 or 2 that Snap-Tite would have recommended? Is that because there was more annular? I'm curious, was there more annular space than it looks like there is than we normally would have if you're putting it in a corrugated metal? Okay.
Definitely quite a bit more annular space than what we're used to. Typically, 40-inch Snap-Tite's can be used in maybe up to like a 60-inch CMP application.
Right.
This product, based on just the hydraulic and structural components that were needed, and Snap-Tite ended up being chosen. So for this one, though, there was probably 2 to 3 times as much annular space as what you typically see with a 48-inch OD Snap-Tite lining project.
Right.
But good question. And one more look at those grouting tubes. And so my apologies, I could not get the drone to take off that day. I thought I was in a restricted zone. So I don't have too many pictures and videos from this one. But at 9:35, we had the first stick of pipe brought onto site. One by one, they were bringing it over from the staging yard about 5 miles down the road. And you see there when that first stick was popped in. And by 1 o'clock, they had fully lined that culvert with 48-inch Snap-Tite. From there, they started building the bulkheads. The next week, they were moving on to the next culverts, or the rest of the culverts. And then they were going to bring out the grouting contractor to do all of the grouting at once, just to reduce those mobilization charges. But again, for this project, they ended up choosing 48-inch Snap-Tite. There were probably a couple options that could have been chosen, but what really narrowed it down to Snap-Tite was the contractor's familiarity with it being such an easy install product, and also BABA was in effect here, so had to be Build America, Buy America standards. But while we are on box culverts, before I pass it back off to Cassie.
Yeah, I was just going to ask I know when this came up that there were other options we could have considered. I know it came down to lead time and Buy America, correct?
Yes, yeah, because the pipe didn't end up getting ordered until, I want to say, May. So to get anything from overseas over here would have been tight, if even possible, considering the timeline for install being late June, early July.
Okay.
But speaking of those other options, because we do represent quite a few awesome products, what you typically see, especially when you're getting into non-circular culverts, is channel line used. with this project, you can see the exposed rebar. You can pick anywhere in this picture, you'll find something wrong with the condition of the hose pipe. There were exposed rebar, missing invert, rusted invert, gashes of the wall of the hose pipe. And just all in all, not quite a culvert that CDOT was comfortable with the condition of for moving forward, especially considering that probably 10 to 20,000 vehicles are using this road every day. So if they're digging to replace this culvert, it would either congest local traffic be well beyond a reasonable amount, or it'd send folks on a 45-minute detour, maybe an hour detour to get from point A to point B. So this culvert was also undersized, so they need to maximize that liner size. And also what I'll show you in a little bit is how they flared the inlet pieces for each run of pipe to increase flow capacity, since this culvert was under inlet control conditions. So one more look at that condition of the hose pipe.
Mostly the condition of the floor.
Mostly the condition of the ground. Yeah, the ground underneath
The
it.
ground.
So much like the other project that I just shown you guys, this pipe was staged about 5 miles off-site at the local staging yard in the nearest town. They're working on a small footprint at this install site, so unfortunately there was not quite room to just line up the 8 pieces per 60-foot run and just knock them all out. But load them in the pit one by one, put on the gasket, spray the lubricant, and then used a steel plate to apply an even force against that liner to push those joints together. And then before I back up a couple pictures, use that same steel plate to push that liner in. And as you guys noted, with there being really no invert left, and the fact that channel line has a more abrasive exterior, you're gonna have a tougher time pushing along the missing invert. So they just use some old guardrail to slide it along. And as I mentioned, culvert was undersized as far as hydraulics go, and they were hoping to maximize the flow as much as possible. For round numbers, these hose pipes were 8 foot by 10 foot. They used call it 9 foot, 10 1/4 inch by 7 foot 9 inch. So it was really fitting like a glove. But before any manufacturing is completed or began, the contractor made a wood mandrel, pulled it through the hose pipe. Once they knew it fit, they knew that the liner would fit, began the manufacturing process, and had it fitting definitely tight, but got the job done. And got some pictures from before the new wing walls were put in place. This was you can see here how each of the inlets were flared. I'll show you guys a few pictures from a Snap-Tite hydrobell project later, but more or less it served as an inlet control to increase flow capacity under those inlet control conditions.
I am going to take over and show you guys a couple of projects that in my states in Idaho and Oregon that are Snap-Tite. Let me see if I can share my screen. Take this back over. So I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. This was a project with Idaho Transportation Department. It's a major 2-lane highway. It's Highway 55 that goes between Boise up north. If you close this highway, you are detouring traffic, let's call it 3 hours out of your way. Essentially, you have to send them all the way around to the kind of the Oregon border. So it is not ideal ever to have to close this highway. This is a 60-inch CMP that you are seeing the ITD crew installing a 54-inch Snap-Tite. I was on site for this. This was probably 4 years ago. This was a little bit of a tight fit. As you can see, that 60-inch corrugated pipe is a little bit crushed from the highway, from the load of that highway. It was also way past its probably design life. It was a 50 or 60-year-old corrugated metal pipe. So with that said, we tried to get that first stick in there. Like I said, it was a tight fit. So what we ended up doing on site was I showed the crew how to make a bullet nose, which is something Michael and I recommend almost always. It's easy to make. It's a chainsaw. It's cutting it. Doesn't even have to look pretty. You just have to have some banding to kind of keep it in that bullet nose. But it really helps get the pipe through quicker when you've got any kind of tight fit. So yeah, like I said, wasn't the prettiest bullet nose, but we got it done because we got hung up there for about an hour or two It delayed us a little bit on site. This also, as you will see from my pictures, was a very foggy, cold morning in February here in Idaho. But once we got that bullet nose in, this pipe, we got 120 feet lined in approximately a day, with 54-inch. So once you figure out that first snap, it really goes quick. This is before Michael had his cool drone. So I have some footage, drone footage, but not a ton. So anyway, that's kind of just want to show you guys that one. The other one that was really interesting that I was on, gonna open the video for you guys, is last March. Of course, I had to be in Portland when it was hailing and snowing. I don't know why I have the worst luck with weather on my installs, but I do. This was in an HOA. We had 1,200 feet of 42-inch Snap-Tite that went into a 46-inch corrugated metal pipe. One reason I'm showing you this is because this contractor was really creative by taking the end of one piece of pipe that they obviously wouldn't need because they could cut it off anyway. And they actually made this push face, which slid in so that the excavator could keep using this piece right here that I'm circling, and it wouldn't damage the joints, which I thought was really unique. Because Michael, remember, I was like sending you pictures from the job site going, I've never seen this done before. And I thought it was really cool that they had done that. They just kind of came up with that themselves. So this was just, I'm just going to show you guys, I was just taking pictures of all the staging on site for this project. They had a massive amount of pipe, as you can imagine. I think it was, I want to say it was 6 truckloads. No, that wouldn't even be right. It was way more than 6 truckloads of pipe. Yeah, probably like 8 to 10 truckloads. So we use this entire park in the middle of this subdivision to stage all the pipe. You can see it here. You can see it here. There were 2 pits dug in this and only 2 pits. So one pit, they pushed about 800 feet of pipe, and another pit, they pushed about 400 feet of pipe under a different section of the neighborhood. I think I have some more videos from this. Yes, I do.
And Cassie,
Yeah.
did they initially consider trenchless technologies for this one, or what was the
No.
approach here?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. They originally, so they were going to excavate each section under these houses. They were going to, so this is a mobile home neighborhood. So they essentially could move the homes, but this was going to take them like over a year to try and basically rip out 1,200 feet of pipe. So then they got an engineering firm involved who did start looking at trenchless technologies. There were a couple different products considered. And then it ultimately came down to Snap-Tite for ease of installation. So I'm going to show you guys a close-up. You can still see my screen, right, Michael?
Yeah.
Okay. This is the faceplate they essentially created. They just beveled the edge with a chainsaw just to save the joints as they pushed each stick, because there was so much pipe. That excavator, 800 feet, obviously a 42-inch is a lot of weight and a lot of pressure on that joint. So you can kind of see what they created, though. I just wanted to make sure you guys had a chance to see that. So that's something now that I show crews, even if it's like ITD doing their own install, I'll send them this video and be like, hey, this is just an idea. If you're pushing a bunch of weight, it's something that you can, it's no cost. It's just something extra to design. Okay. And then my last job is another ITD job. This was up in Priest River again in November while it was snowing. We were freezing our butts off. And this was, there was a lot of rock and debris. So a lot of times the crews, this was actually an outsourced job. So the ITD crew didn't do this themselves. But the crew went in there and we had to pull a lot of rocks and boulders out and stuff beforehand. But you can see this is a very typical condition for something that we deal with. It's a lot of rusted out pipe. Snap-Tite can be installed in the wet, so we don't have to dewater the entire pipe. We can very much or very often just deal with the standing water. So this was the outlet of the pipe. And again, I recommended a bullet nose. So the contractor, that was a really pretty one, bullet nosed and wired it. We can always pre-order it bullet nosed, but we a lot of times just recommend you guys do it yourselves. And then this is just a little, I think, clip. Again, Michael, I don't have your cool drone yet. Eventually we'll do that.
So you guys can see they're still cleaning out some rock.
But you
around
can
the
see how bad a
pipe.
condition this pipe was
It
in
is
that we were
very bad
dealing
shape.
with.
You can see the rust around the outside. The
But
pipe
like I
is
said,
really
this is a
gone.
very typical
the
Snap-Tite kind
inlet
of
here.
situation for us. With that said, Michael, we've got 12 minutes. I'm gonna pass this back to you if I even need to. I don't know.
One question in case you do know the answer. That culvert looks a lot rougher than most of the ones we see.
Yeah.
Typically, we recommend about an extra 15% compared to the annual space calculation when grouting to make sure all the voids are addressed. Do you know how much that one used?
Gosh,
I don't mean to stump you. I was just curious because
no, I know.
that's
And
a rough
Northwest
culvert.
Grouting was the subcontractor on it. Robin
You
and
can
Bob
answer
over
if
from
anybody's
Washington.
curious then.
Yeah, that's a great Robin question. I know that they factored in a lot of extra grout because of the voids. And this is, you guys, I guess I wish I could have shown you. This is under a major highway up north. And so we were very far down too. So there could have been a lot of soil fill on that. I don't think Robin was unprepared for that though. I think she knew that there would be a lot of soil or a lot of soil to fill because of how much rock and how bad a condition the hose pipe was in.
Definitely. Yeah, they've done a
Yeah,
few projects. They know what they're doing.
Yeah, in a perfect scenario, this probably would have been fixed a few years earlier before the rust had gotten that bad. But this isn't atypical for us, right? Like this is a lot of pipes. It's they get addressed in this condition and it's fine as long as the grouting contractor that comes out after, whether the crew installs themselves or hires out, accounts for what that could look like.
Perfect. And I believe need to pass back the torch.
Okay. And make host.
Okay. 11 minutes. Let's go with. All right, let's go with.
And you guys feel free to jump in, ask questions about any of the projects that we're showing you or any other projects you might know of that you have just want to pick our brain about. We do have a lot of big projects coming up that we'll be doing another Reline Live, I would imagine this fall. I have got a massive Idaho Transportation Department project coming in August. There's going to be 4 culverts, 3 of them are ovaled. They're very large diameter, ranging from 63-inch down to 42-inch. So I will be on site with the contractor that's doing that project. And making sure that I document it all and have a lot of cool stuff to show you guys after that gets installed.
And I'll be actually down in Southern Colorado tomorrow for a 60-inch lining project with a 78-inch to 60-inch reducer. So I'm sure that'll be next Trenchless Tuesday, if not the one after.
Yeah.
But going back a few years to what was actually one of the first projects I was on site for in my territory. So my apologies for the not quality photography, but that came with time. You guys can see though the rusted invert. There were multiple deflections throughout this hose pipe as well, although they are not clearly pictured. And this culvert was buried about 20 feet deep under State Highway 9, which is the exit for Breckenridge Ski Resort. So even the inspection was in September for us. Install was in October. So you're about a month out from probably doubling the average daily traffic, somewhere in that 10 to 20,000 vehicles per day range. So not a culvert that CDOT would ever consider digging up, and not a culvert they wanted to have to deal with every 50 years. So they only considered 100-year design life options, and Snap-Tite was chosen. Again, ease of install, as well as the fact that fish baffles could be welded out in the field. So that was taken care of ahead of time. And luckily the staging was much closer than a few miles off site for this one. So 1 by 1 lowered into the pit. Just like the other projects, gaskets applied, lubricants applied, and I have a handful of snapping videos here. So even with it being October, when it's a little bit colder, the sun was still beating down the pipe. It may have gotten slightly ovaled. Turn off that volume. May have gotten slightly ovaled, so they were using a combination of chains and come-alongs or the choker method, which right there you saw the choker method at play. And I will skip forward in this one, where I believe you will also see the choker method at play. So one of the 2 Snap-Tite joint grooves is already in place here. And once the superintendent passes, you will see it just drop right into place. And if I have the audio on, there's typically an audible click, so you know the pipe's been snapped together. There's also going to be about a 1/4 inch or less gap as well. So from there, it's clockwork, push into place, continue snapping, push it in place, continue snapping until it is going out the outlet. And with this one, they wanted to cut it flush. So they put the chainsaw up against it. And a few months later, I was able to swing by and take a look at the condition of the pipe about a half year after install.
So
You
with
can
the
see-
grout ports on that one, Michael, because it can be done multiple ways, did they pre-install the grout ports before they slid the pipe, or did they attach? It almost looks like they attached the grout ports to the pipe.
Let's see here.
No, they didn't, because I know
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, it looks like they were probably U-bolted in ahead of time.
Yeah, so there are two ways, just so since some of you are familiar and some of you aren't familiar with Snap-Tite, two ways contractors can do it, or crews that are doing it. They sometimes will go in ahead of time and attach those PVC ports to the top of a corrugated metal, or like you saw, a box culvert. Another way to do it is just to staple them right onto the Snap-Tite, depending on how long of a run it is, in lifts. And so some contractors do that as well. And either way is fine.
Either way works.
Yeah.
Especially when it's a 24-inch CMP, a little bit easier to just
Yep.
put it on the pipe as you're sliding it in.
Yep. Very much so. So.
Good point though. And so just took a video to show you guys. Obviously the hydrobell is not in full effect here because the water wasn't rushing in. That's probably more of a more of a May situation than April, but you can also see how the fish baffles / energy dissipators were slowing down the velocity of that water going through the pipe. And worth noting with the hydrobell, we can get into specifics if we need to at a later date, but if inlet control is impacting the flow capacity at all, the hydrobell can help in high head conditions, can help make up about a 30 to 40% difference in flow capacity if it's impacted that much.
Right. There's a lot, okay, well, a question, but an answer too.
Yes.
There's a lot that goes into knowing when you could use a hydrobell. It's a very inexpensive thing for us to add to the inlet. If you know that you're gonna at any point 2 or 3 times a year have major storm events, that you need to get water into that pipe quicker so that it doesn't go overhead on the roadway. So that's one thing Michael and I run into. A question for you though, Michael. You said energy dissipators and fish baffles. What is the difference?
So in the field, as far as what they look like, they're more or less the same.
Okay.
Energy dissipators would be more so to help controlling sort of like erosion issues that are out the outlet because massive debris and water is going to be rushing through.
Yeah.
In this situation, it was initially spec energy dissipators. It turned out that there was aquatic life going through the pipe, so they were therefore aquatic passages.
Look at you. You knew the answer so well.
Oh yeah. I presented at some aquatic life conference a couple of years ago.
I was just thinking, I was like, I wonder if he's gonna be able to answer, because I was like, in my brain, we just deal with it all the time. So you and I kind of like know what the difference is, but that was a very good answer.
Thank you. And multiple fish baffle styles, depending on what you guys need, whether they're more the classic shelf look, corner baffles, notch wear baffles, depending on flow conditions, aquatic life, and such. So let us know what you need and we can do it.
Yeah, any of our stormwater products, whether it's Channel Line, whether it's Snap-Tite, whether it's Spiralite, any of our stormwater products offer a fish baffle or energy dissipator or whatever we want to call it, as options, because we can customize all that stuff during manufacturing.
Perfect. So let's see here. What is next? I will start off with the ovaled one, just in case we don't have time to get to the next circular one.
Let us know too if we're going to run out of time, guys. We've got 4 minutes left. If anybody has questions, feel free to raise your hand or pop it in the Q&A box and we'll get it answered before our time's up.
Yeah. So this was a county's first ever culvert rehab project. It was also their first ever self-installation. They're in a very, very rural part of their state. So getting material, contractors, any sort of resources to complete a replacement project would have been a complete nightmare and extremely expensive. So in September, I swung by, took a look at the culvert, and as you guys can see, it has seen better days. So this CMP was the equivalent of a 54-inch CMP. It may have been able to call it 60 by, what would that be, 60 by 48. They went with an ovaled 42-inch. Those measurements weren't right because they end up going with an ovaled 42-inch Snap-Tite. Let's see here. that day at 9 o'clock, we started putting together those grouting tubes. By 11:30, everything was U-bolted into place and ready to go for the install. So after a quick lunch break, we were underway. And just like the Craig, Colorado project, gaskets were put on in the field. Lubricant was sprayed on both sides of the joint to ease that snapping process. And just like he said, it's going to go, and it went.
And question.
Yeah.
Is that little gap that we still see there after it snapped, is that normal?
That is completely normal. I'm blanking on what the cutoff is for each sizes, but I believe with the 63-inch, it could be up to a 1/2 inch. Still be considered a watertight, fully structural seal.
Yeah.
And then smaller diameters, 1/4 inch, but most of the time I'd say it's flush, if not near flush.
Yeah. Because remember, my funny story with that was when I showed up in Emmett with one of the ITD crews, and they had been cranking and cranking and cranking on this 48-inch pipe because there was a tiny gap left. And I got there and I said, you don't have to keep cranking. It's good. It's watertight. You guys have already cleared the gasket. You heard the snap. They go, where were you hours ago? And I was like, I was told to be here too. So,
but
yeah, totally.
Yeah, if there's ever questions in the field, you guys
Yeah.
just give us a call. We'll get you the quick answer, and
Yeah.
you don't have to crank chains and come-alongs for an extra
And
2
yeah,
hours.
as long as that gasket and that snap has been heard, so that gasket is the watertight piece, that grout's going to come in and seal up that little bit of gap anyway, and that gap doesn't matter, especially in the larger diameters. It gets a little bigger with as the bigger the pipe goes. Like in a 12-inch, it's going to sit flush, but in larger, it's just a lot of pipe. So
Exactly. And then much like the Frisco, Colorado project, snap the joint together, keep sliding into place, continue that process. It is very simple, folks. This was, again, this county's first ever self-installation. And to quickly point out, we typically dismiss that. We typically recommend using a steel plate like with that channel line project, or just maybe a wood plate, just something to protect the joint as you're pushing in. But this was the last joint on that side. They were going to cut it flush, so the condition of it was no longer important. As you can see here, same thing. So again, we started that lining process at 12:30. By 4 o'clock, we had completed the installation of 144 feet of oval 42-inch. That was their first time.
yeah.
I'd say pretty smooth. So it is 10 o'clock. Is everybody still on? Do you want me to run through one more, or should we save the surprises for next time?
Still on.
Okay.
If you want to run through one more, feel free. If not, we
one.
can call it. I will throw it out there. If anybody has any questions, throw them out now for us. We'll answer them. Michael can show you guys one more project. You might as well, since everybody's still on. Yeah.
And I'll keep it quick. We'll give people a couple minutes to type some questions too, if there are any. This was a county self-installation, another actually first-time culvert rehab project, first-time county self-install. Last summer, Colorado had a lot of major rain events. The county was called in to take a look at this culvert because the invert at the inlet had been ripped up from all that rain. And upon further inspection, all the invert was rusted. The one joint here in the 72-inch CMP had been deflected down to 66 inches. So it was coming down a little bit. This culvert is also underneath the one-way in and one-way out for probably 40 to 50 homes in the subdivision. So not a culvert that the county could afford to fail. So 2 weeks later, the install was underway. I think a week later we had the pipe on site, and then they just wanted to coordinate their crew a little bit better. So with this one, it was 105 feet. They used 124-foot stick of 54-inch just to get the project started. And then they were worried about using only 24-foot sticks because of the strength of that excavator arm pulling from so far away with the choker method. So they went with 9-foot sticks just for easing any sort of concerns. So at 8:35, they were pushing that first 24-foot stick in. Later in the day, the rest of the flatbed had showed up with the rest of the pipe. You can see here, chains of come-alongs were used. You also see later on the choker method was used, but here's the wood blocking at the top of the hose pipe. Worth pointing out, because I don't think I showed any of the projects, but most all culvert rehab projects, owners want to keep that invert at the same level. The pipe can float during the grouting process. So to keep the pipe from floating during the grouting process, you're just gonna put some wood 2x4s along the top of that hose pipe, and that is gonna be how you go about preventing the flotation.
And a lot of
Um,
times we
go ahead.
are dealing with such small annular space that you won't necessarily see a contractor or crew do that. But when you're dealing with larger diameters and larger gaps, then that's when we'll see it.
Right. And worth pointing out again, while the Craig Colorado project used those concrete shelves to slide the pipe along, while the chain line project had an old guardrail, Snap-Tite again can clear any sort of misaligned joints, rusted inverts, etc. If you guys are facing those most all the time. By 2 p.m. that day, they'd packed in dirt on both sides of that liner extending out from the hose pipe. That allowed the annular space to dry out. The next day had the bulkhead materials coming in to build those concrete bulkheads. And then they bring in the grouting contractor a month later. But I'll leave you guys with one last sped up version of this install, with the first joint being cranked into place with the chains and come-alongs, and you can see him drop that joint and pop that second groove in.
Yeah, so they were using both the excavator and the come-alongs.
Yes.
Got it.
A little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, never
Right.
hurts. And there's that ripped up invert at the inlet that they had removed and just used the Snap-Tite to extend out that hose pipe.
I mean, essentially, beside for that truck that has the pipe sitting on it, that road would never have even been closed because the excavator was off on the side.
And this was easy enough with traffic control just because, again, there were 40 to 50 residents on the other side. So,
Yep.
Yeah, everybody's happy to have their culvert fixed.
Yeah, a lot of times we don't even need traffic control. Sometimes we do. A lot of times if we are off the roadway enough on the side, we can get away with no traffic control. Just depends on the highway and it depends on the project.
Like this one right here. That was traffic control.
Yeah,
Doesn't get much easier.
couple of cones.
Well, that wraps up what I had to share today.
Well, I don't see anybody else in the chat, so we are going to wrap up for today. Thank you for joining me, Michael.
Absolutely.
And
Thanks for having me.
him and I have a lot of stuff coming. So we have our first thread liner project with King County Public Utilities that we'll be installing ideally in September. So we'll be doing another probably huge Reline live on that because that is over 360 feet of threaded liner, which we have never seen in our career. So that will be exciting for both of us.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks guys. We will have the recorded version of this out. If you need anything from me, CEU credits or anything, just ping me an email, and most likely it won't even be me. It'll probably be Bailey who you hear from to get that to you. And she's on the webinar too. So anyway, thanks guys. Have a great day.